and welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and today I'm going to be talking about what was probably the only sunny day we've had in ages, which was Rustival at the weekend. No doubt you've heard and seen lots about this fantastic event that took place over the weekend at the British Motor Museum in Gaydon, and I'm probably quite late to the party, but sticking with my usual upload schedule, this is today's podcast episode. Now, we had an absolutely fantastic time at Rustival in March of this year, so we knew that getting to Rustival 2 this year was going to be a real highlight of the latter half of the season, really. And it's a fantastic way to kind of wrap up lots of what will be the end of outdoor events and things, especially when the weather is being like it has been for the last few weeks, and I can't believe how good the weather was. So we set off from ours at about 6:30, trundled our way along the A14, a bit of the M6, and then along the Foss Way to the British Motor Museum, and got there for about 8:30. I had hoped to get there a little bit earlier, but it is much harder getting up at this time of the year when it is so cold and dark outside, I have to say. We were quite early, though, and I think a lot of people were heading for the end of the arrival period, and we got ourselves a decent spot on the Women Drivers Social Club stand. The Women Drivers Social Club were once again the biggest represented group at the event, which is hugely impressive and something I'm super proud of. And started welcoming everybody into the spaces, guarding off the spaces from people who needed to park elsewhere so that we could all park together. And we had a really good turnout. I think everyone was pretty much in place by about 9:30, which was fantastic. And we were down on the VDP parking directly outside kind of the museum entrance, which is a great spot for people to be able to see us. And we had such a variety of vehicles. We had a Polestar down to a Hillman Imp, a Montego, I think it was, through to a Land Rover. We had a Mercedes A-Class, a Traction Avant, Peggy, and a little Mini, a real range. Oh, and Mavis the Snail, the huge Great Defender camping setup. It was a real eclectic mix of vehicles, and it was fantastic to have them lined up, because it really, our collection of cars within the club really matches with the ethos of Rustival's All Wheels Welcome. Now, some of my day was taken up by meeting with a photographer who is doing a piece with a journalist for a magazine called The Simple Things, and so we met up with him, got some photos by the cars before we grabbed our merchandise and headed over to Friendship Corner for our official group photo and meeting time, so that everyone could grab their bits and pieces, have a group photo, get to meet everyone and find someone to walk round with if they hadn't come with a friend, because car shows like this are always much better if you've got someone to enjoy them with and point out the interesting things that you spot with. And it was great to see so many people going around and doing that. Once we'd had our fantastic little meet and I'd got everything back to Peggy, wrap up the kind of merchandise for the day, I was up on the stage with the fantastic Car Chum podcast. And if you want to hear what we chatted about to Danny Hopkins from Practical Classics, our little chat is now up on their podcasting platform. They were able to plug their equipment into the sound system, so they got a really great recording of our little chat. So I will pop a link for that down in the description for you if you'd like to hear us talking about podcasting and automotive podcasting on the Rustival stage. It was really fun. We had a great chat, and we really filled the time. I think we possibly even overran a little bit, and it was a very quick change on to the next topic, but it was great to talk with the guys, especially as I'd met them in the first Rustival in March. Then time to grab myself some brunch, I guess, from the cafe at the British Motor Museum. It's always something that I love, their food and their sandwiches and stuff there, and so well worth going in and grabbing a good sandwich from them. And following that, it was time for me to actually start to have a look around some of the cars. I did have to do a brief bit more photo taking with the photographer, and during that I managed to have a nice little chat with John Coupland, and he managed to spot Peggy in her photography position on the ground when we had popped off to take some more photos in his video. So if you've watched his roundup of the day, far more coverage of all of the cars in that if you want to see a lot of the photos, and there'll be loads of videos that are coming out, but this is just my experience as usual. And yeah, managed to have a pretty good walk around VDP and Mayfair, and there was just some fantastic stuff about. It is such a fantastic show for getting some unusual stuff that either you've not seen a really long time because it's stopped being kind of street furniture, or because it's stuff that was rare to start with and quite unusual. We spotted some fantastic Reliant scimitars up in Mayfair that really caught our eye because it's something that Jamie's been looking into potentially getting one. We were really close last week, but unfortunately that fell through, and one of them that was up for sale was identical to the one that he had been eyeing up, so a little bit salt in the wound, but they were absolutely glorious. There was a fantastic WDSC members MX-5 in purple and kind of holographic up there as well that caught my eye, and yeah, just so much cool stuff that you don't always get to see anywhere else. And people are so friendly. If they buy their cars, they'll have a good chat with you, and if they're not, then they've often left a good bit of information in the car about it. I need to get better at that. I used to have a nice little thing that I'd put in Peggy to kind of talk about her, but it got quite outdated obviously after the restoration, and I've not really done one this year, so I need to do a nice updated one, I think, for next year. But so many cars with fantastic stories, cars that have been in the same family for years or rescued from scrappage schemes. And alongside all of this, I didn't get a chance to watch some of the great stuff that was on the stage, but it was great to see so many creators being represented, myself being a reasonably small creator getting the opportunity to go up there, but also some of the bigger ones that you might not expect to see and are often overlooked by other shows with stages, and even a small creator that won the fantastic competition that the team put on to get a new person up on the stage talking about their content creation for classic cars. Once I'd seen a lot of the cars and some of the auto jumbles and stands and stalls, picked up a few bits of merchandise from the various YouTube stands, I made it my priority to this time do the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Trust and the Collection Centre, because the last couple of times I've managed to kind of go a little bit round the main museum but miss those out. And a result of that, I've missed out on their fantastic display in the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Centre of women who made their mark, and it's been up since International Women's Day, and I was so glad that it was still there, because because I've obviously missed it the last few times. And it's all about women who have played their part in getting the Jaguar name out there, being part of improving Jaguar's heritage and history. And it's just a fantastic display of loads of women's achievements and highlighting their part in motoring, which I think is a fantastic thing to have done, and I really enjoyed looking at that. And I think it can be missed and overlooked a little bit because it's to one side and you might not realise necessarily what it is. But there's a great video playing that they talk to current women who are working in Jaguar Land Rover, and it's just a great little display and a nice thing to see be done by a museum. And then upstairs you obviously have the collection centre, where all of the cars that aren't on display at the moment in the museum are stored. And one that really caught my eye was a fantastic little Mini 1275 that had got quite a fantastic history in terms of it being used to cart people around the Longbridge factory until it had a crate dropped on it, and at that point it was then stored in the tunnels under Longbridge as kind of a way of scrapping it poorly. And some urban explorers found it. It was reported, and then the British Motor Museum were able to work with the current owners of Longbridge to recover it. And so it is technically the last Mini to have ever left Longbridge, but they do own the official last Mini to have ever left Longbridge as well, and that's on display in the museum. But it was fantastic to see. Only 11 miles on the clock, and it had been stripped of all of the useful parts, but other than that it was really cool to see, and to see where the damage had happened that had obviously meant that it was no longer being used for essentially golf buggy duties around Longbridge. But that whole area is full of fantastic, unusual bits of equipment, fantastic vehicles, and just a delight to see. Once we'd finished there, it was getting towards the end of the day, and I'd made sure that I'd seen all of the cars that I wanted to see outside, although having watched other people's videos, I realised very quickly that actually there was so much stuff on that I missed and didn't quite catch. They took arrival photos when you turned up, and I didn't even get a chance to go and see what my arrival photo looked like and if I wanted to grab it. But I'd seen all of that before I went into the Jaguar Daimler Heritage Centre, because I knew that some people had come a really long way. For example, Gemma and her dad on the WDSC stand came in their fantastic Toyota all the way from Scotland the day before, and then had to get back to up near Glasgow-ish that night for a show the following day. And so yes, people were starting to leave not long after the winners had been announced for the day, but it was still a fantastic display regardless. And when I left the exhibition centre, the car park was looking decidedly quieter and a little bit more empty. There were still a few people buzzing about, seeing the last of the cars or packing stuff away and things, but people had really started to trail off. Whilst I was primarily there with the Women Drivers Social Club, I think it's worth shouting out the fantastic Morris Minor young members who flew the flag for the Morris Minor young members together and got themselves parked up together in VDP with the flag. There was Yayan and Tashi was kind of between the two stands really, and then obviously Andy, Matthew, Lewis, Peter and James, who had all brought their cars along, and I believe had a pretty good day. I know Matthew had some issues with overfilling his car with oil, but it's all these sorts of things that the young members gradually start learning about along the way. But fantastic for Matthew to have got his car to something without too many issues, because I know some issues in the past had made him a little bit nervous, or the car had decided it wasn't going to happen. But a great bunch to have representing the young members, and they had their flag up over their collection of cars. But I guess I'm just really adding my voice to an increasing number of voices of people speaking very highly of the fantastic Rustival. It's a real joy to go to and a real joy to be part of, because it's really taken that idea of welcoming all vehicles and all people interested in any sort of motoring to the next level, and really made for a nice welcoming space that is kind of more about finding your people who love cars as well, than it is about being the shiniest or the best car there. And I think that the collection of winners really showed that. It was everything from a camper van to a Vauxhall Cresta in a gorgeous pink colour, which I believe is local to me. And it was just such a fantastic display of joyful motoring. And the team, Steph, Carly, Ian and Matt, have worked really hard to keep that going, and then work really hard on the day to not only make sure that the online support for the event and joy and friendship translates into the kind of event itself, but also to get lots of content and coverage of the event out there afterwards for those that aren't able to come along, because they've obviously got pretty far-reaching audiences, and while the location works great as being reasonably central for most people in the UK, reaching those much further afield audiences can be tricky with these sorts of events. So making sure that there's some content and coverage of it can be really important. And they do a great job of balancing it and only making it look mildly stressful. Now, we ended up leaving Rustival pretty close to 5 o'clock, I think, which is when the museum and everything closes up. We headed to a lovely little pub, and it was a fantastic little meal with my sister and her boyfriend and Yen and Tash. And also in the car park we were joined by a gorgeous green Morris Minor that was owned by Vicky, that had the fantastic kind of indicator repeaters, Mickey Mouse style, on the roof, which were great to see. And we made a fantastic little lineup in the car park all together. After a good meal, it was time to head home, and I think we got home kind of about 9:30, having stopped for a bit of fuel. And then it was very much a straight into bed situation, because we'd been up pretty early and it had been an awfully long day. And I know some people, including Gemma, who had gone all the way back up to Scotland, had shows the following day, and I don't know how they did it, because I spent the entirety of Sunday in my pyjamas, just kind of doing bits and bobs around the house because I was so tired. But a well worth event to get exhausted from, and we truly had a fantastic time there, and I eagerly await the announcement of the next one, though I know they need a nice little break between then. I'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who came up and said hello. It's always so crazy to think that people recognise me from this at these sorts of events and manage to spot me, because I often miss half of the people that I'm going to try and say hello to and see, and you're just in a blur and focusing on the cars. So well done for being so eagle-eyed, and thank you ever so much for coming and saying hello. Thank you to everyone who said lovely things about how good Peggy's looking. She does look vastly different to the last time she was at Rustival, but not the last time that she was at British Motor Museum. All the fantastic work on her is still holding up absolutely beautifully. And finally, a big thank you to everyone who's been so lovely and supportive about my announcement last week of starting my kind of new business venture and working freelance. And there was a lot of lovely conversations about it at Rustival, and a lot of lovely people saying some really nice things the whole time that I was there. So and also online as well. So a huge thank you for that, because getting this sort of thing off the ground is so tricky, and to have so much support for it is always a brilliant thing and means a lot. So thank you all very much for that. Now I've finished my award style thank yous, it's probably about time I wrapped this episode up with one more thank you, which is to thank you ever so much for listening. We've got one more episode in this series, so then it will be time for a little break for us, but we'll be back with some more fantastic content very soon after that, I'm sure. And in the meantime, drive safely, especially in weather like we've got today, and happy motoring.